and further to this launch, there was a lot of talk about the processor. Didn't hear much talk this morning about the chipset. Can you tell me a bit about the new chipset that's come with this launch?
Sure. The chipset is actually enables a lot of what I did talk about this morning.
Okay.
When some of the intelligent capabilities,
Right.
The quick path technology is the interconnect. And what that does is, that speeds up the memory bandwidth. So we get, 3 times the memory bandwidth by our architectural implementation of the memory controller. And then the speed of the interconnect is about 2.4x what it was prior. So that's all related to the chipset, as are some of these other features I mentioned. The Intel Node Manager, which is an algorithm, if you will, or a tool for an IT manager to work with some thermal limits they want to put in place to get better, more consistent power management.
Okay, I noticed around the launch of this Xeon, obviously a lot of the OEMs were launching products, but quite far in advance of all the rest. There was the Apple workstation that had the Xeon 5500 series in it. Can you tell me why they managed to be so much earlier than everyone else?
Yeah, there's always controversy when we pick a single launch date. Mm-hmm. Whose quarter end does it impact and what have you. And as I mentioned, once we decided we're going to launch in the first quarter, we had to accommodate all kinds of different events that were planned already. Apple had their event already planned. So what we basically did was we agreed to allow them to speak to the Nehalem workstation at their event. However, they weren't allowed to post pricing or ship or anything prior to any of the other OEMs. So
all they could do is talk about it.
They could talk about it, and of course it always creates a controversy as to why did they get to go early. And
Apple likes to be special, doesn't it?
If you go back probably in the history of all our launches, whether it's server or client, there's usually this one-upmanship that kind of happens, and frankly, it's not a lot of fun being the referee. This is a great launch, but at the end of the day,
you get a few phone calls and emails.
Did we? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm going to sort of broaden it into sort of talking about more general technology. One thing I'm curious about, again, 2 of your competitors, NVIDIA and AMD, have been talking about GPU, sort of computing using the GPU. Can you just tell me your thoughts on that sort of general phenomenon from an Intel perspective?
Well, we certainly see that as an emerging, piece of the compute model. Although today we still feel the processor itself, when it comes to high definition video and much of what's required today for good display is processed on the CPU. That being said, we're the largest graphics player with our integrated graphics solution. And as you probably know, we're investing in Larrabee, another code name, which is a discrete player we're going to have to address not just graphics, but high throughput computing in a discrete fashion.
All tech journalists are always curious about Larrabee. It's been in the works for a while, and it's obviously a very big deal if Intel suddenly decides to get into discrete graphics. Is there any more you can tell us about how that's progressing?
Yeah, it's progressing fine. We're trying not to drum up too much, discussion on it because
it's happening anyway, though.
It's happening because there's a lot of curiosity, as you said. But we're not trying to overstoke things and set an expectation. Things are moving along from the standpoint of the engineering, but again, nothing imminent as far as any announcement we're going to be making relative to a play. We're continuing along with the engineering efforts as well as engaging the ecosystem players that are very relevant in the space.
Okay. And another area Intel looks to be sort of expanding more strongly into technology-wise is the very sort of low-power processors. Obviously, Atom's been a massive success within netbooks and that sort of thing. But I'm sensing that increasingly there's direct competition with Intel and ARM in these smaller, more sort of handheld, like mobile internet devices, a term that Intel likes to use. Can you give me an assessment of sort of ARM as a competitive threat to Intel in that area?
Well, ARM's always played in a different space. When we had the X-Scale technology, we were working with the baseband chipset and the phones years ago. We ended up divesting that and selling that to Marvell. We competed, but what's happening now, Scott, is we're taking a whole different approach, and you called it. The Atom processor was always designed. It wasn't designed just for a netbook. It was designed from the bottom up to be a very low cost, very low power Intel architecture processor, meaning all the software would run there. So the initial play, of course, very successful in netbooks, as you pointed out. Very quietly making great progress in the embedded space. I mentioned in my keynote this morning, digital surveillance cameras all over the city here that are now connected to the internet. Atom processors, the digital signage, in-vehicle infotainment. You look at the kiosks that you're seeing in airports and hotels. All that is ripe for an atom processor.
Yep.
Because, again, it gets connected to the internet runs on IA, and the beauty is we're talking about these embedded designs. It's sub 5 watt, so it's a fanless implementation. So we're very excited about that, and you'll see us move along as we pursue the handheld business, where our objective in the handheld business is to be able to bring the internet experience that you see on Intel architecture to a handset in a device that has a battery life long enough to meet that usage model.
Well, I think that's all we've got time for now, Tom, but thank you very much for your time. It's great speaking to you.
Appreciate it.
So I've been talking to Tom Kilroy from Intel. You've been watching HEXUS TV.
Tom Kilroy, Vice President, Digital Enterprise Group, Intel, and you're watching HEXUS TV. That's how it's done, Pat.